Let me bring up our next guest, who I met when I was working at AOL for about 6 minutes after I sold my last company to them. Chamath Palihapitiya is here. Where is he? Come on up, Chamath. Please welcome Chamath. And Chamath, of course, is famous because you joined a small company called Facebook when it had how many millions of members were there when you joined?
I think it was like 30?
30 million 35? Members. Yeah. And so it was a fraction of the size of MySpace, and you joined the company and were put in charge of growth. And by the time you
left,
left,
originally. That was an outcropping of basically me doing a really poor job at everything else that I was originally assigned to do.
Oh, I see. So you failed and you went to growth.
Well, you know, when I first came in, it was kind of like we had a COO, that role had changed, and then, you know, I had this weird swath of things, which was like platform, which was kind of cool, very cool at the time. We had just launched it, it was going crazy. Some ad stuff, we had no ads, we were running party poker ads on the site. So kind of creating some stuff around that. PR, legal, random. Anyways, long story short, the ad products got us in, you know, a little bit of hot water.
Yeah, the Beacon. Which
it
seems is Beacon back now? It feels like it's like a better version
of... It's Facebook Connect. It was just at the time, I think in 2007 or 2008, probably a little ahead of its day. And, you know, we had these really interesting ideas of how we wanted behavior to occur. And so we wanted to build it, right? Which was awesome. I mean, I didn't realize that, you know, MoveOn.org and everybody else were going to sue us, and there'd be, news cameras trying to peer in the third floor of like 156 University Avenue in Palo Alto. But it was at the tail end of that growth started to kind of what I thought was going to go monotonically negative, and so, you know, pitched this idea of creating this team called Growth, which was to figure out engagement and, you know, optimize around things around engagement and virality.
And it's interesting, when we had our venture capital panel today, the venture capitalists were saying the main issue for us is not if you can come up with a good idea in a good market and put together a good team and make a beautiful product. There's a lot of people who can do that today.
Yeah.
But the key is growth.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing is, like, you know, so when I first came down to the Valley from Canada, I was part of a small little music player company called Winamp. And we had like 80, 90 million users. And at the time, that seemed like every single user in the internet. And you fast forward 10 years now, and, you know, it's amazing, but like you've seen now products get to 1 billion users, Facebook. And what you realize is, like, you know, 10 million is a new million, right? And 100 million is a new 10 million. And so there really are these massive numbers of false positives because there are so many people that are now wired and connected that any single random person can distribute it, can demonstrate enough behavior so that a whole bunch of stuff can actually have a few million users. It just doesn't mean anything the way it used to.
Right. Getting to 2 or 3 million users today is promising, but if it's not growing,
starting line.
It's a starting line.
It's a starting line to say, okay, I actually could potentially have something that could possibly, maybe, be really interesting.
And when you left Facebook, however many years it was later, how many millions of users were there after you left?
I left when it was like 750, 800 million. It was weird too because, you know, along the way, we made a bunch of adjustments. One of them was we used to talk about growth as sort of the only primary metric, and we used to talk about engagement and platform. We talked about them, but almost secondarily. And the outcropping of that was, you know, it was an extreme maniacal focus on this one group. So much so that, you know, even a bunch of my compensation was tied up in getting to a bunch of these numerical goals. And so I had every reason in the world to stay, but I just got to a point where at like 750, 800, it was like, I looked at it and I was like, wow, we're gonna get there. It's gonna take another 18 months, but we're gonna get there. So then the real question is, am I gonna sit on top of this thing, right? Or am I gonna try to get myself out of my comfort zone? Because that next 18 months, I felt like I'd just be preventing the guys that worked on my team, who were frankly better than me. They should have been running the team anyways.
Right.
And I would have been a blocker.
Yeah.
You know, and I wanted to do these other things. So it was kind of the right time. July of 2011 is when I left.
The maniacal focus on growth, was it at times too maniacal that, you know, that's why we saw some of these like
100%, and it was the absolute right thing to do.
So
listen, most people and most companies can barely get one thing right. And we all kid ourselves about trying to do so many different things, but there is a value to focus, which is it constrains optionality and it forces you to have clarity of thinking. Because otherwise what happens is you have all these outcroppings of people within a company that can have their own anecdotal point of view about any kind of random thing. And if they practice that rhetoric enough, they sound like they know what they're talking about. And then what happens is you invariably try a bunch of different things and then you end up nowhere. But if you constrain the problem to say there's one thing, it forces everyone to be an expert or know that one thing, and then speak intelligently and most importantly, factually about that one thing. And so you can't bullshit and you can't grin fuck people. And when you can't do that, you actually have good decisions and you force clarity of thought. And that's hard.
And at a place like America Online, which I was coming in the revolving door, you were leaving. We waved in the...
on the way.
On the way.
Exactly.
We did see a lot of that brain fucking going on, as you're saying, where people were intellectuals and they were smart.
Okay, let's listen. I mean, like, that is the place. I tell people it was the best experience of my life in many ways because nothing worked, and so you learned all the things what not to do. In success, we will all conflate luck and skill because that's what happens. Right. Oh, I'm the best. This is amazing. It's going up and to the right because of me. It's probably like 5% true, but 95% of it are a bunch of externalities that are hard to account for. But when things are not working, you know what you did, and you know that it didn't work, and you should be, intelligent enough to put two and two together and actually say, hey, this is a great lesson learned. So with AOL, I mean, like, you got to understand. In 2001, okay, we were at Winamp and we were kind of like putzing around, and we were like, let's use all the cards on file, because AOL had like 25 million credit cards, and let's let people buy songs for 99 cents. I mean, this sounds crazy that I'm even telling you this story because it sounds like I'm this, person that's kind of like reliving the past. But that's what we did. And they launched a download store for 99 cents. And the thing worked because it was just one click. And I remember it was like Red Hot Chili Peppers, Sarah McLachlan. There was like only 12 songs you could buy. Click, 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 like crack. Boom, 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 boom. And so we put all the numbers together and we said, we think there could be something here. Maybe somebody should try to build it out. It took 2 years of meetings for that to get to a no.
2 years.
2 years of meetings to get to a no. And I remember being in New York when, Apple launched their store, and I remember because I remember we were talking to the labels, and I said, we would leave the meeting, or we would be coming into a different meeting with a label, and say, oh yeah, Eddie Q and James Higo were here. And it's like, you just hear it over and over. So you knew they were up to something.
Apple. Yeah.
Apple.
They were coming.
And then, in 2002 or 3 or whenever that was, you just sit there and you're like, I mean, how could we completely screw the pooch on this?
Yeah.
25 million cards on file. At the time, 80 million users of a downloaded media player, another 50 or 60 million users of a music product. And try as we might, we could not figure out how to crack the bureaucracy. Amazing lesson learned for all the things what not to do.
And it seems like Facebook figured out a way to not have bureaucracy. Was that just the power of
it was great.
The structure that Sean Parker put in place with Zuckerberg, sort of owning the company for all intents and purposes?
I think Zuck is responsible for the culture. I think Parker was responsible for never allowing the random intentions of other people to get in the way and potentially replace Mark in those early formative years where the risk was the highest that could happen.
So he protected Mark from getting taken out by some VC.
He allowed Mark to become what is now a great CEO or a very good CEO and will be a great CEO.
Right.
And I think like a combination of those two guys deserve the credit for that. But I mean, like, Zuck is incredible because the guy is just like black and white, unemotional, listens to like a gajillion different opinions, can bring it all in, and doesn't get influenced by ego. And it is a huge learning. I remember when I walked in there, we used to celebrate the engineering culture. And I had this real chip on my shoulder because my background was in EE. And I didn't even think that coders were engineers. I'm like, no, I'm an engineer. I'm a device physicist. That's engineering. You're scripting. And I remember just like having this massive chip on my shoulder. And he he just helped me unlearn so many bad habits. And now it's like I just see the clarity of that thinking and that culture. And now we all try to emulate it in all the rest of our companies.
Right.
But man, I don't know how and where he developed that perspective, but it's amazing.
And where do you think they go from here? They have the billion users. They were able to buy Instagram. Obviously the IPO was a little bit of a clusterfuck.
Yeah.
Shit show, clusterfuck. I don't know exactly somewhere between those two.
Yeah.
And so what happens, I mean, obviously they're working their way through whatever happened in the IPO. What happened in the IPO? Why did that go off the rails so poorly? Go off the rails so easily?
I think that's also, I could speculate because that's all I can do, but it seems to just be a combination of like people just so amped up and so excited on the folks that were sort of empowered to run the process from the banker side, how you build the book and all of that stuff. It's like, I just think, just everyone got way too excited. Now, so what is left for them? It's what every other good company that's trying to be a great company tries to do, which is to iterate. And, that's the big difference between startups and I think these bigger companies is you're in a channel where now the expectations are iteration. The expectations aren't revolution, right? Now, when you can be a big company that does revolutionize, i.e. an Apple, you get these massive discontinuous improvements. But the status expectation is iteration, and maybe there's an outlier chance that those guys revolutionize something again. I don't know.
Yeah. Do you think Google will? It feels like the YouTube purchase was pretty revolutionary, and that product is. And now the Google Glass movement and obviously self-driving cars. How do you?
They're a great company. For me, I had this really special opportunity to have dinner with someone, and he said, you know what the difference, and he listened to my vocabulary, and he said, Chamath, your expectations are out of whack. He's like, every company that you think is great, I think is good. And every company that you talk about fleetingly is really great. And he's like, there's only been 3 or 4 great technology companies in Silicon Valley. Apple, Microsoft, Google, Intel, multi-$100 billion market cap companies that have been around for 30 plus years or will be around for 30 plus years and finds a way to grow at scale. And so by that definition, he's right. And so Facebook is a good company, really good company. Hopefully will be a great multi-$100 billion company. eBay is like that. Yahoo is like that. So in that definition, it seems to me that the real challenge is like, how do you figure out, like, where are these like random few things that nobody's thinking about and to do it totally differently? To me, that's just like, it's a really hard problem. Not fit for me. That's why I cut and run.
Yeah. So you cut and ran and started a venture firm, social capital partnership. I know you raised the first fund was, I don't know, $400 million.
Yeah, it's $275 million.
And you took a different approach in the LPs, the limited partners. These are not, if I've read it correctly in the news and what you've said previously, not the CalPERS of the world, not the Harvard endowments. These are high net worth individuals in general. I mean,
when I left, I felt really lucky because I felt like I worked hard, I did my best, and I, in many ways, and maybe this is like the immigrant guilt or like growing up poor and then not being poor anymore, I just felt like I got more than I deserved. And this is like the inherent baggage and chip on my shoulder. So then I'm like, okay, well, what do I do with it? And the biggest thing that I felt was like, I just always felt like, okay, I'm reasonably good, but I don't think I'm that good. And I see people every day that are so much better than me, but then there's all these impediments. And so why isn't someone really focused on building and using technology to basically remove those barriers? Because those are like the interesting problems of our generation. And there just wasn't enough focus on that. So I wanted to do that. But in doing that, the problem is that when you go and talk to traditional limited partners, what they want to hear is, well, what was your return? Well, the reality is, when I was an angel investor, I crushed it as an investor. But I just had this massive chip on my shoulder of like, I don't want to prove to you why it's all about the numerical returns. I took like $14, $15 million, and I literally almost 10x'd it. I mean, I know how to invest. But that's not the point. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The point is like, what's the value? The value isn't when you exit and then you get a check. The value is like, what is the legacy and the tail that's left over? And so I wanted to find people that resonated with that message, where I was like, listen, guys, worst case, I'll beat the S&P, and I'll crush it for you. So as an example, like we publish our numbers to Cambridge and Associates, and like they'll show you. It's like you look at the S&P last year, 17%. We were almost 3 times that. So on any numerical basis, we're dramatically outperforming. But that isn't the point. I don't want to talk about numbers.
Right.
I want to talk about like why healthcare is broken. I want to talk about all the people, like all the women in this audience who could, some of you, have a gene expression for breast cancer, and why you can't get an answer for that because it's going to cost $15,000 and it should cost $5. Or why a lot of us graduated with so much debt, and if I didn't get lucky, frankly, I don't know what I'd be doing because I'd be buried under hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. Why isn't that problem getting fixed? Why aren't all of us finding easier and cheaper ways to get access to money? And so it was just easier to find a group of individuals who were either already extremely successful and wanted to find a way to focus on those sort of like as a way to create their legacy, or people that frankly wanted to use technology to work on really big problems. And just that narrative just resonated with them, and I found it much easier to raise money from them. I also found it more credible for myself, where I woke up every day and I said, Chamath, what are you going to do? Are you going to basically fund the sale of Indonesian wood baubles on the internet? Or are you going to try to solve cancer? Right. And I was like, fuck it, I want to solve cancer. Right. And if I burn through all my money that I made at Facebook doing that, I don't care. Right. I was born poor, I will die poor, and the only thing that's going to be left over is what is the legacy of all that cash. Right. It's not going to go to my kids.
Right about now, I think your kids are crying.
Yeah, there's.
Can a little bit go to them?
You know, it's so interesting. Like, you have kids, and it's like, you know, how do you raise kids when you're in this weird state? And I had this really great meeting a week ago with this guy, David Fialco, who runs General Catalyst. And he said the most amazing thing. Your kids only know you as you are. They don't know you what all the struggle you went through. Right? And so for all of you guys out there, you know, all of you who have children, may have children, the craziest thing is, like, you really are at the pinnacle of your industry. The fact that you're even here, you're doing this stuff, you're already in that sort of, you know, to use a cliche, that 1%. And so it's almost like this weird thing where, like, your kids just see that.
Right,
and
that's
they have
their only
no
world.
idea all the stuff that happened as a preamble to get you to that place. And that's like a really big challenge, which is another reason why you focus on big ideas. They see you every day get up and just go and grind it out for 12 hours. You come home, you're haggard, you have meetings on Sunday, your kid's bouncing the ball, they're like, why is he in the dining room with all these random people? It's progress.
Yeah. Hey everybody, what a great show we have for you today. Everything's going great at This Week in Startups. The show is doing great. We're sold out for months in advance. We got a great team, Brandis, Kieran, Demont, Crude. We're just really crushing it. And the reason we're able to do this program and do it consistently with expensive microphones and great lights and great guests and traveling across the country to find those entrepreneurial stories, to find those investors, angel investors, venture capitalists, to explain how it's all done and how they scale companies is because of great partners like Hiscox, which provides small business insurance. You can get the right insurance right now. They do something that nobody else does. They'll give you a quote right now. You just go to hiscoxusa.com. Go to hiscoxusa.com/smallbiz. Hiscox, Hiscox, USA.com/smallbiz, B-I-Z. And you get tailored coverage. It's all the coverage that is customized to your specific needs. And you don't have to go meet with an agent and do all that stuff. Not that there's anything wrong with agents, but I mean, we're busy as entrepreneurs and we want to get stuff done. We want to do it at 1 o'clock in the morning or whenever. And it's great value. Competitive rates start from just $22.50 a month. Yes, you heard that correctly. And they have a real passion for service over there. 96% of their customers, including this one, would recommend them to a friend. Products include things like professional and general liability. You need to have this stuff. Business owner's policy, workers' compensation insurance. Get your quote by going to hiscoxusa.com/smallbiz. Once again, hiscoxusa.com/smallbiz. And thank @hiscoxsmallbiz on Twitter for supporting independent media like This Week in Startups. Really customized coverage and competitive pricing. That's all you need to know. You're going to get your quote right now if you go to hiscoxusa.com/smallbiz. Thank you, Hiscox. It's been great having, I guess we're in like maybe the second or third year of our relationship together, and you guys have been a tireless support of entrepreneurs, tireless support of startups, and This Week in Startups, and I really do personally appreciate that very much. Let's get back to this amazing episode. Let's talk about some of the investments. There was a company you were telling me about, the one that helps people test their blood. I forgot the name of it. Tell me about it.
Look, this is a great example that kind of like epitomizes sort of my frustration with traditional venture and why I don't know whether we're going to be successful, but we're going to try. So we find these 3 PhDs, you know, it's like kind of like it's the starting of a bad joke, but they're running around the valley, and I meet them because a guy that worked with me at Facebook went to Caltech with these guys and said, Chamath, this stuff is crazy. Basically, no one will talk to them, which is like right up your alley. And I was like, sweet. So I sit down with these guys, and he pulls out a chip. And right away, like if you're like, you know, if sort of like if you load like the last 10 or 15 years of investing, if all of a sudden you're trying to pitch something in silicon, I mean, people would rather take $5 million, put it in a pot beside the entrepreneur and light it on fire and watch it burn than give it to this guy because it has a higher likelihood of returning capital. Okay?
The cash burning, yes.
And so he's like, I'm like, oh, I was like, oh, don't show me silicon. He's like, I'm going to show you silicon. I'm like, all right, what does it do? And he said, I took a CMOS sensor, the phones that are in your, the chips that drive your camera phone, and I made a mass spec out of it, a mass spectrometer. And all of a sudden, the light bulb goes off. And I'm like, you did what? And he says, yeah, I'm trying to build basically a sub $200 device that's like about yay big. It'll sit on your countertop, and I can replace a $600,000 machine that you use to analyze your blood. And so and I said, go on. And he's like, well, it'll only be a drop of blood. So then I'm thinking to all the times where I, go to the doctor, he takes vials and vials and vials of blood. It takes a week. I sit in some random place at LabQuest or whatever, Quest Diagnostics, and I get these random results on paper that's like faxed to me, and I'm like, what is going on here? This is the state of the healthcare system, and no wonder people are dying left and right. And he's going to replace it where I can empower myself. And it's using line of sight on a technology that basically is now putting technology in front of a really big problem and saying, okay, this is just going to scale at Moore's Law. These are sub $1 tests that run on a $100 device. So anyways, on the spot, and I don't normally do this, and look, it could still be a huge mistake. It may not work, although it's kind of working right now. I funded it on the spot. Didn't talk to my partners, didn't talk to anybody. I'm like, you're done. Boom. And then I called my guys. I'm like, hey, guys, I think I found something. We should drive to their house in Redwood Shores, maybe. And then anyway, so we drive there that night. You pull up to this random house. I mean, this is like so beautiful. So that's why this thing has to work. It's like a random house in Redwood Shores. And I walk in, and it just looks like three basically like bachelors live in this place. And I'm like, okay, show me the goddamn mass spectrometer. They're like, okay, follow me. They walked me into the garage, and they had built a fab in their garage. And they had a clean room in there. And there was a table where they had constructed the device. And literally, like, the cops would show up, because you look at the power draw on that thing, they thought it was like a crystal meth lab. You walked in there, you would have thought like Al-Qaeda was building a bomb in that place.
Yeah.
It was crazy. But they had done that on $500,000, and they had run out of money. And so what they were doing was building a different version of the machine and selling it on eBay, because they couldn't find people to take the risk. So like that's an example where like, man, I could lose $20 million in that company. I don't care. So proud of what those guys are doing. And now, a year later, it's like 20 people, amazing caliber of folks.
And what will the outcome be?
The outcome will be all of you will have a little device. Well, at a minimum, the outcome is when you go to the doctor, he or she, it's the 21st century version of a stethoscope. They'll carry it around, it talks to their iPhone, and with a drop of blood, do 200 analytes. Like just a basic metabolic panel, a complete blood workup, a lipid panel, whatever you want, it will tell you in 3 minutes or less with a drop of blood, okay? But the best case, look, I mean, the point is, like, it gives all of you guys a chance to take control of your own health. And I'm convinced that you can do more for each other than the healthcare system can do for you. And all you need is the information.
Yeah.
So that's what we're trying to solve.
Yeah.
But the best case is that $100 device sits on your countertop. You wake up in the morning while you're brushing your teeth. You're like, hey, I wonder what's going on inside my body. You prick your finger, a little drop of blood, 3 minutes, boom, you know. And you go off to work and you just know that you're doing the things that you need to do. And when you're not doing the things, it helps you course correct. And it helps you course correct early with simple things. You know, diet, exercise, changes in behavior, motivation. That's what we all need to do for each other if we want to kind of like live as long as we can, you know?
Let's shift over to education. We had a company here last year, All Tuition. They won the 2.0 competition with a very beautiful product and a great team, including Sue, who wowed the audience with her vision and helping people get into school and figure out what school was the best value. You guys fell in love with the entrepreneur, but not exactly the idea. You thought there were some bigger ideas, and you worked with her and pivoted. And so tell us about that interaction from the launch festival last year till now.
Yeah, so Sue's presenting tomorrow at 10:30, and so I would encourage you all to hear about the new idea. And I won't front run it too much, but I was lucky enough to be a guest judge.
Yep.
And I'm sitting there, and she walks up, and her and her co-founder, Silas, one of her other two co-founders, who's the chief head of product, is on stage, and they're talking about the thing. And it's like a tool to help you consolidate school debt and manage it or whatever. And it's technically a very difficult problem because you have a bunch of disparate sources of data You have to normalize a really gnarly data set, just things that are just technically burdensome. And I thought to myself, they built a good product, and they deserved to win on the basis of that. It was beautiful, it looked really nice, but I just thought the idea was crap. And I'm like, here are really good folks that are going to waste a bunch of time, in my opinion, on a marginal idea. So they ended up winning launch. It was great. And I sent them an email because you hooked me up with them. And I had them over and I said, look, guys, I love you. I don't love this idea. Here's this other thing that I've been wanting to do for a while that is not well addressed. Can we iterate on that concept together? And so the three of us spent a few weeks and came up with this totally different articulation of the problem. Nothing related to school debt, all related to people and our intellectual capital, our human capital. How much are we worth? How do you make sure that the best people are able to float to the top on a totally meritocratic basis? Identify the best, give them the access to the best jobs, the best education, et cetera. And she came back to me 2 weeks later and said, you know what? We're going to do it. They moved the company from Chicago. They moved it into my office. And we've been working on it ever since. You're going to see it. The progress is pretty stunning. There's growth that I didn't expect. It's early, but it's working. And it's just a really amazing story of just like folks that had the courage to question the conventional thinking. I'm not to say that this idea is the best idea since sliced bread, but it's really ambitious. And look, the likelihood of failure, I tell all people, likelihood of failure is 99%. No matter what you try, you're probably going to fail. I mean, that's just the nature of startups and how they work. And so you might as well just swing the bat on something crazy and big and audacious. Because that 1% chance that you slipstream in there, you'll look back and you'll be like, how did I just do this?
Right, but somebody has to.
Somebody has to.
If it's 1 in 100, somebody has to be that 1 in 100
somebody has
that makes contact with the ball.
Somebody has to.
Right.
And you know what? If it's Indonesian wood baubles, then so be it.
So be it.
So be it. Everybody needs a good bauble.
You're the best poker player in the technology industry. I've played with everybody. You went the furthest in the World Series of Poker. You got down to the top 100 and so.
Yeah.
In the main event, we're talking about a 7,000 person event, about the size of this event, actually. So how does poker inform your thinking on life and startups? I mean, obviously, you're very risk
Poker's amazing.
tolerant.
Poker's amazing. If you are...
I mean, it's basically how we became friends, was just at the card table.
Yeah. I mean, I thought you were a jerk.
Well, so does most people when they meet me. In
fairness, really, you were such a jerk. I was like, God, this guy's such a jerk. And then the more and more I spent time with him, it's like, God, and then I was like, no, you're like a fungus. You just grow on people. And then it's like you can't wash it off, and then you like him, and then you love him, and then there's nothing you won't do for him. It's just like...
I'm sorry, it was when you called me a fungus that I had to do the spit check.
I mean, you're unbelievable. You're unbelievable. You're a beaut. You're a total beaut.
A fungus. Okay.
You're a beaut.
Wow. There's the quote of the event.
But no, yeah, we bonded over poker. Poker's this amazing thing because like you learn to take risk and you learn to love risk. You learn to make decisions in ambiguity. It's like the cycle of a startup condensed into 2 minutes. And so
let's do that decision of ambiguity.
Well, you start with a hand. It's kind of like you start a company with an idea. You have no idea whether it's good or not good because you really have no context in knowing everything else that's out there, meaning in this case, the other hands, or in the startup's case, all the other companies. You try, you take a bunch of risk, you expend a bunch of capital, and sometimes you win and sometimes you don't. And sometimes you win for the wrong reasons. Sometimes you lose for the wrong reasons. Sometimes you win for the right reasons. And so it's just a really great teacher of like life. And for me, I love it. The other thing that I love is that I really like to understand people. And what makes me reasonable in that game is my ability to read people. And anything that I can do to refine that skill, I think is just time well spent, and poker tends to be a great outlet. I mean, the game that we play in, that Jay and I play in, it's just so great because it's like you, me, Sachs, Goldberg, you get all these, Ted Maidenberg, you get all these really interesting folks. We spend time talking, you debate stuff. And at the end of the day, you win or lose a little bit of money, no big deal. Now, all my public poker playing, I play on behalf of the Boys and Girls Club of East Palo Alto. My goal eventually, I will win a big tournament. I will win multi-million-dollar tournament, and they're going to hit the jackpot, and it's going to be great. And they make signs, and they tweet it out, and so I was 15th in the LA Poker Classic high roller. I could have won them 300,000, and then I lost. So this week there's one in San Jose. I'm going to play in a couple tournaments, trying to win them some money. So it's great, man. I love it. I absolutely love it.
And the fund, how much of the 275 has been invested now?
So we're on, the great news is, we've had some really good early success in Fund 1.
Yammer was a huge hit.
Yammer was a huge, look, last year across all the things that I'm invested in, my early stage stuff and social capital, we participated in about $2 billion of liquidity. So, we're doing well for a fund that's 2 years old. And so things are going well. And so we made the decision to kind of raise a second fund now, which we did. So, we have another, more than 275. We're not going to say the final number, but, we raised a really good, healthy chunk from the same folks, plus added a handful of new, really key, amazing people. By the way, let me tell you about, I just want to kind of here's where I will talk about making money. So last year when we had a distribution, we made a bunch of money on Yammer. Thank you, David Sachs. And we shipped it all back to all of us, right? Myself and all the other investors. And a few weeks later, Mayo Clinic is one of our investors.
The Mayo Clinic.
The Mayo Clinic, yeah. Which, if I'm Buddhist, so I'm not even religious, but I would say, that sort of phrase, they do God's work.
Yeah.
They're doing God's work to the extent you believe in God.
Yeah.
This is like a quaternary care facility. Like when you or someone that you love is on death's doorstep, they are the ones that will do more to save that person than anybody else in the world. And so when you're working on their behalf and you make the money, and then you're back there in Rochester, Minnesota, and they point to the 8th floor and say, Chamath, if you ship us another 20 million bucks, you know what we're going to do? We're going to refab the entire floor. And that's the kids' cancer unit or whatever. Man, that's amazing.
They know how to work it, yeah.
But you want to work on behalf of guys like that. Yeah. They are on the side of good.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, they're not just going to buy a boat or something with the return.
And none of us, heaven forbid, any of us or any of our loved ones ever have to see the inside of that building. But the fact that there are people there doing that work, it's a nonprofit, and then we can do what we do well. Because everyone asks us, everyone asks me, and we go through that whole cycle, right? You get successful, and then people knock on your door. It's like foundation this, charity that, whatever. And I actually just took a step back and said, you know what? That's just not me. It's not how I'm wired. I like to sit and grind it out with product managers and engineers. I like building stuff. I like launching stuff. I build companies.
And it's just as viable as giving money to charity. And in fact, it's more.
It's more. And because you can solve a lot of the problems that some foundations, frankly, and nonprofits are just not well equipped to solve. Because you need technologists, you need engineers. And a lot of these folks are choosing between Twitter and Google and Facebook and Square. They're not choosing to go to a nonprofit. You need a cap table. You need capitalization. You need the chance to make the millions of dollars. And then they'll come work for you. And so I want to use that to direct those folks on the side of making history, right?
And that's why it's the social capital partnership.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so that's where making money is kind of cool because I'm not inherently that charitable necessarily, but there's a lot of folks where if we are successful, they're going to do great things for the rest of us, and we will have enabled them to do it. They're experts in that, and we're experts in company building and kind of doing cool, crazy stuff.
So what else have you invested in as we wrap up? What are the other companies that you're particularly proud of in the first year and a half of the firm?
It's really hard to pick out a few, but we have a balanced approach, which I've told you about, which is, we're taking a lot of pretty crazy bets. Yeah. And there's a high probability that most of that stuff goes to zero. So how do you balance that? And so we balance it by saying, okay, out of a roughly $300 million fund, we'll take 100 million of it and just compound the shit out of it, right? And so this is where Yammer, Box, SurveyMonkey, huge stalwart names, you go to bed easy at night, they're going to crush. They are crushing. They're going to.
You stay stalwart, but they'll be in the future. I think you see that before.
They're monsters.
Yeah.
Pure storage monsters.
Yeah.
Monsters in the making. And then that gives me a ton of confidence.
Right.
Because then it's awesome. All right, we're going to return still better than 99% of all these funds anyways. That's just with that. And then now this other stuff will free roll. And so, stuff on the medical side that we've done, integrated plasmonics, which we just talked about. We built this really cool biosensor company, which are sensors that can basically detect the potassium and sodium ions that flow across your muscles as you work out. So we're building clothing that has these sensors built in, and on your phone you can see exactly how your body is moving in the intensity. It can do injury prevention. It can do rehabilitation, stuff like that. We've done some really, really interesting stuff in the enterprise and SaaS marketplace. On the education side, Treehouse is here.
Yeah, Carson's coming.
And it's, this is like, by the way, when we talk about education, we talk about skills, right? The idea that there's a country here where we need to all realize and decouple value from education and say it's not about a degree that makes you smart and valuable, it's about how you can do cool, interesting, useful things. And so a skill-driven economy is like the basis of GDP expansion, right? And so, well, that's what Ryan is doing. Teach every single person how to code, get them into a really good job, get them an ability to be retrained. That's how we keep people that are going to stay in the workforce now until they're 70 years old, engaged and productive. And that's how the US wins. And it's not necessarily about getting to an Ivy League school. And it's not necessarily about being 100,000 in debt. It could be mean paying $30 a month. We just as a society need to respect this person as much as we respect that person. And once we do that, it's a huge sea change.
And it seems like the change has already happened here. It just hasn't happened maybe outside of the couple of major cities. I mean, people still respect some of these degrees.
We would do this, interesting psychological analysis when I was at Facebook, which is just trying to figure out, like, what are the social norms in which societies operate by? And one of the most interesting social norms that exist in most Western developed economies is when you meet someone, the narrative for introducing yourself to someone new always generally starts with what you do and where you went to school, right? Because we've now established this sense that that is the most preeminent qualifier of your skill and your value. Nobody ever starts by saying, oh, I'm a dad of 3, and I really like to play golf, and I run. People say, I work at Facebook. I went to the University of Waterloo. Well, that's where I went. Not that well known here, but it's a good school. And it's a damn good school.
I actually never heard of it. Keep going.
But it's because you're a fungus.
Where is it? Where is it?
It's outside Toronto, where they invented penicillin for fungi.
Got it. Okay. Full circle. Well done. Boom.
But anyways, like the point is, like, so we've been taught, we've been entrenched that that's what's valuable, right? But if you look 20 years and 30 years forward, it's like you think, people in China and people in India, where most people aren't going to get into Beida or IIT, are saying that they're just going to refactor themselves and their social value around other things, and their economies will just expand and move forward. And so we need to sort of question, like, hey, these archaic, simple, subtle signals that are holding us back, we need to kind of chip away at those things.
Yeah.
And so I want to find, when a company is built on, with great engineers that doesn't necessarily go to any grade school, that graduated from Treehouse, that did whatever, that has skills, got good jobs, working for you guys build great, amazing things. That's what chips away. And then that's when the rest of the United States, and particularly the East Coast, kind of, starts to question all that historical bias.
How hopeful are you about the United States? I mean, you spend some time internationally, I know in China, India, et cetera. Like, are we deluding ourselves that we're going to continue to be as competitive as we are?
I'm Sri Lankan. No. When I emigrated from Sri Lanka to Canada, we were in the midst of the beginning of a huge civil war that ravaged that country. In part why my father, when he left, decided to stay in Canada at the sake of everything, gave up everything. We grew up in Canada, which was a wonderful, sort of like social meritocracy that really optimized for the middle. And then I came here and I was blown away. America is the best country in the world. Best place in the world. I could not have done what I did anywhere else. And I feel super lucky that I was able to emigrate, that I was able to get a green card, that my kids were born here. I feel super lucky. But that's not enough to sort of like have it be great for the next 30 years. Right. And this is where, honestly, I feel like there's so many of us that are at this fork in the road, where it's like, am I going to really try something crazy, or am I going to do the iterative next thing? I don't know healthcare, but should I start to try something there? I don't know education, should I start to something there? Or, should I improve macros in Excel? And I think a lot of us, unfortunately, take the road, that path. And this is where I feel lucky to be here, and I feel every day when I encounter people, it's kind of telling them, like, hey man, like, whether you were born here or not, or you're here, the point is, you're going to be celebrated for failing. So you might as well be celebrated for failing doing something crazy, because then if you're successful, you'll be celebrated for doing something successful, but more importantly, you'll be a merchant of progress. And that's the sickest thing in the world that you can be. Not rich, not cool, not popular, but you move the world forward. And that's an elusive thing, you know? And it's like, for me, that's like the only thing right now that I give a shit about. I want that. I want to be a merchant of progress. I don't know how to do that, but I'm going to try.
On that note, Chamath Palihapitiya. Wow.